Most fans remember Qui-Gon Jinn as the Jedi who died in The Phantom Menace, the Maverick Master, killed by Darth Maul, leaving Obi-Wan to take his place. But the lore around him is much darker than that. Qui-Gon was the only Jedi the Sith were actively measuring, the only one whose death they actively wanted, and his absence is what shaped every disaster the Order suffered for the next 23 years. The Sith plan against the Jedi had been 1,000 years in the making by the time he became active. It was built around a specific kind of Jedi, one who would follow procedure, consult the Council, and accept the institution's reading of events as final. Qui-Gon was none of those things. He trusted what he called the living force, the moment in front of him, over rules and prophecy charts, and that trust kept leading him into the exact places the Sith plan needed him not to go. Plagueis and Sidious had built their structure around predicting how the Jedi would behave, and Qui-Gon was the one variable they could not predict. When Maul cut him down on the floor of the Theed Generator Complex, that was not a lucky kill. That was the Sith plan working. The Jedi who replaced him in Anakin's life was a knight who had just been promoted that day, who had no master of his own to turn to, who was barely older than the boy he was now responsible for. Every choice the Order made about Anakin Skywalker after Naboo was made by people who were not the man Qui-Gon had been, and the consequences of that absence ran all the way to a black mask and a burning Jedi temple. That is the part most fans never sit with. Qui-Gon was the one Jedi Plagueis and Palpatine actually feared, and the reasons they had feared him go deeper than what any single mission ever showed. Years before Naboo, on a world called Gala, Qui-Gon Jinn stepped off a transport with his young apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi and found a cloud car waiting to carry them into the city. He thanked the driver, refused the ride, and chose to walk. That small choice says a great deal about the Jedi he was becoming. Qui-Gon did not want to enter a mission at a distance. He wanted to feel a place for himself and read it through the living force before anyone else could shape its meaning for him. And long before Naboo made him impossible to ignore, there were already signs that he moved through the galaxy differently from almost any other Jedi of his generation. On the other side of that galaxy, a Sith Master named Darth Plagueis was doing the opposite, studying the Force the way a scientist studies a specimen, pressing into its deepest mechanisms, trying to command what Qui-Gon had simply learned to hear. In the story his apprentice would one day tell at the opera, Plagueis treated the Force as something to be studied, pressured, and finally commanded. The sources never put him in a room with Qui-Gon. They do not need to. In a galaxy where one man was quietly teaching himself to command the Force, the Jedi who posed the subtlest threat was always going to be the one who stepped off a transport and walked, because he trusted the current more than the cloud car. The mission itself was supposed to be simple. The Jedi Council had sent Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to Gala, where a dying queen had agreed to hold the world's first free elections. Their role was to observe, monitor the situation, and keep the peace. But the novel Jedi Apprentice: The Mark of the Crown makes clear that Qui-Gon was already moving through the mission in a very different way from the moment he arrived. For him, a mission began the moment a Jedi's feet touched the soil of a new planet. Sight, smell, sound, and touch, every sense was a way to connect more closely with the Force. The book explains that some masters could sense the whole shape of a mission from just a few steps on unfamiliar ground. It was the posture of a Jedi who expected the place to speak first. Because of that choice, trouble found them almost immediately. Within minutes, they were caught in the middle of a political street fight with two rivals clashing and campaign signs being used as clubs. Qui-Gon did not draw his lightsaber, and he did not pause to ask for instructions. He took in the scene at a glance, brought down two attackers with a single Jedi escape move, found Obi-Wan at the edge of the chaos, and guided them both safely out. Before the supporters of either candidate even realized what had happened, the two Jedi were gone. When they finally reached the Queen, Qui-Gon noticed something else. Queen Vita was middle-aged, but her connection to what the Jedi called the living force was almost gone. He felt it the moment he met her. When she looked back at him, she quietly said he was right. She was dying. Obi-Wan was shocked because he had not sensed it at all. The novel states this plainly. The boy did not yet share his master's perception. From there, the mission changed completely. The dying queen confessed that her son Beju was not the rightful heir. She had a daughter instead, hidden away in the mountains and raised among an exiled people known as the Hill Folk. Her name was Elan, and the queen wanted her found. But there was a problem. The Council of Ministers did not trust the Jedi, and in front of everyone, they had made Qui-Gon agree in writing that he would not leave the city. 2 days later, he left the planet anyway. He told Obi-Wan to cover for him. Each morning before dawn, the boy slipped into Qui-Gon's quarters, messed up the bed sheets, and pressed his head into the pillow so it would look as though someone had slept there. When Obi-Wan later asked why he had agreed to those terms in the first place, Qui-Gon answered calmly that it was better to let them believe they could control the Jedi. That answer was the line that would define him for everyone who studied the Jedi from a distance. Obi-Wan was still a learner who trusted rules first, and the difference between them sat in that single exchange. Qui-Gon was not rebellious and not proud. He had simply already decided what needed to be done, and he saw no reason to pretend otherwise. The novel shows this clearly when the Council of Ministers assigned a young spy to watch the Jedi at all times. Qui-Gon thanked them with perfect politeness, then placed the boy directly between himself and Obi-Wan, making the whole setup look foolish without having to say a single word. The Queen saw it at once, and the minister did too. This was the man who, years later, would find a slave boy on Tatooine. The man who would face the Jedi Council and name this child as the prophesized chosen one. The man whose judgment the Council would accept, question, and never fully replace. And the Sith, both of them, were watching closely. The order he served did not move the way he did. The Jedi High Council interpreted the will of the Force through 12 masters, each bringing judgment to a shared decision, while Qui-Gon read what was in front of him and acted on it in real time. The Force moved through the Council the way decisions move through any large body, by procedure. For 1,000 years without a Sith adversary, that was a strength, a way of staying deliberate, shared, and hard to rush. But the procedure is also slower, easier to divide, and easier to steer with selective information. Qui-Gon trusted the current beneath the process and met each mission as it revealed itself, even when what surfaced carried him past the limits of his orders. That left him able to perform the outward shape of a Jedi assignment while quietly following a very different path underneath it. Years later, the Revenge of the Sith novel captured that pattern in a simple way. Qui-Gon had little patience for rules when they stood in the way of what truly mattered. That same streak would appear again in Anakin Skywalker in a far more dangerous form, while Obi-Wan over time would slowly grow into a looser and more human version of the Jedi Qui-Gon had always hoped was waiting inside him. That was exactly where the trap was weakest. The Sith plan had been designed against an institutional Jedi, one who stayed inside the limits of the missions he was given, reported everything up the chain, and accepted the Council's reading of events as the final one. It assumed a Jedi who would honor a formal agreement even when instinct told him otherwise, and a Council whose votes, procedures, and hesitations could be studied from a distance and planned around. Qui-Gon was the kind of Jedi the trap was never built to catch. He moved the moment the Force spoke and stopped consulting the institution around him. And no amount of patient observation from the outside could predict what a man like that would do next. Yoda himself would later admit, in the hours after the order fell, that the Jedi had become too rigid to change. Speaking softly to the Force, the ancient master confessed that he had been too arrogant to let the order grow. He had trained the Jedi to hold to a way of life that the galaxy had already moved past, and by the time he understood that, it was already over. That confession was made in conversation with one specific voice. The voice of Qui-Gon Jinn, the man who had found Anakin Skywalker in the first place on a desert world the Jedi never planned to visit, in a junk shop in Mos Espa, where the owner's slave was a small, quick-talking child born without a father. The Revenge of the Sith novelization offers the clearest insight into why that meeting mattered so much. Looking back, Mace Windu remembers that he supported Anakin's training because his own gift in the Force allowed him to confirm what Qui-Gon Jinn had already sensed, that the boy from Tatooine was the chosen one spoken of in prophecy, born to bring balance to the Force. Mace did not arrive at that understanding first. He was confirming something Qui-Gon had already recognized, and that was the part no later Jedi could really undo. Yoda and Mace were left to carry a meaning they had not chosen and could not fully test, because the one voice that could have answered their questions about it was already gone. Long after, Obi-Wan would tell Padme that his master had believed Anakin's training was the will of the Force. He also admitted that the Jedi accepted that view partly because the prophecy came from their own tradition. and like any order, they tended to read events through themselves. The idea that Anakin had been placed in their path by something greater than the Order began with him. From that point on, later choices followed the path Qui-Gon had opened. Mace Windu supported Obi-Wan's rise to master, and he supported placing Anakin's future in the hands of someone young and untested. The novel says he did this because he sensed powerful lines of destiny linking Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Palpatine together, for good or for ill. But none of that would have happened if Qui-Gon had not gone before the Council and named what he believed Anakin was. The Council resisted him, questioned him, and refused him. But Qui-Gon reacted the way he always did when he felt the Force had made something clear. He made it known that he would train the boy anyway. He would take Anakin as his own apprentice, teach him himself, and meet him as a person rather than a problem to manage. He never got the chance. What happened on Naboo has been shown so many times that it is easy to stop seeing what it meant. A Sith Lord, the first the galaxy had seen in more than 1,000 years, stepped out of hiding and fought 2 Jedi inside the power generator complex in Theed. He killed Qui-Gon and was destroyed soon after, but the fight was never just about who happened to be standing in that corridor. Qui-Gon Jinn was struck down in the same week he had identified the Chosen One, presented him to the Jedi Council, and committed himself to becoming the boy's first true teacher. What followed was not a smooth handoff, it was a chain of uncertain choices the Jedi had never really made before. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had only just been a Padawan, was raised to knighthood almost at once. He took Anakin Skywalker as his apprentice partly to keep the promise he had made to Qui-Gon, and partly because no one else truly stepped forward. The Council allowed it, but their doubts never went away. Years later, Obi-Wan reflects on what it meant to become a master. In the Stover novel, he realizes that a Jedi's real education begins only when he trains a student, because so much of being a master is learned from the person beside you. By that measure, Obi-Wan spent 13 years learning from Anakin. He saw in him the same boldness and the same easy disregard for rules that Qui-Gon had carried before him. Through Anakin, Obi-Wan slowly let go of some of the rigid correctness his own master had once tried to soften, and in time, he became the kind of Jedi Qui-Gon believed he could be, but that inheritance came secondhand. In the Revenge of the Sith novelization, the truth comes through a simple conversation. Anakin tells Obi-Wan that Palpatine had been kind to him ever since he first arrived on Coruscant, that he had looked after him and become like family. He sets that against Obi-Wan, whose whole life had belonged to the Jedi. The week the Jedi were burying Qui-Gon, Palpatine had already begun to take the place Qui-Gon had been about to hold in Anakin's life. At one point, his familiar fatherly smile even reached his eyes, though the novel makes clear that this too was part of the role he was playing. By its own rules, the Jedi Order could not fill that place for Anakin. The Order forbade attachment, and because it taught that all things pass, its answer to loss was always the same: detach, let go, release. But that answer did not work for Anakin. The novel describes the fear growing inside him like a dragon, a cold voice in his heart reminding him that all things die, that even stars burn out. That fear remained because the Jedi gave him no other way to carry it. Qui-Gon had approached people differently. He met people through the Force as they stood in front of him, attending to what was already there rather than forcing it into a rule. And those first weeks with Anakin would have begun in that same way, with attention instead of instruction. Palpatine understood that. He won Anakin over by being present, by listening where the Council lectured, and praising where the Council assessed, and by giving words to what Anakin already feared was true, that the Council kept him at a distance because they feared his power, that they would never truly accept him, and that they wanted to use him without ever fully recognizing him. Palpatine did not seduce Anakin with the dark side, he seduced him with the experience of being known. The Jedi Apprentice novels show what that kind of connection looked like when Qui-Gon actually lived it. When he met Elan, the leader of the Hill People, in a snowstorm high in the mountains, he sensed her through the Force and treated her as someone whose inner life could be felt, not just studied from the outside. With Anakin, that same kind of bond would have shaped the whole training. Palpatine could only imitate it. Then the years passed, the Clone Wars began, and Anakin became the hero with no fear, even as something colder kept growing inside him. By the time Palpatine took him to the opera, he had already been dreaming of Padme's death for weeks, the same vision, repeating, of her dying in childbirth and him unable to stop it. He had watched his mother die in his arms once, and had not been able to save her. The fear of losing someone again was the wound he had never found a way to close, and the Jedi had never given him one. Palpatine had been pressing that wound for 13 years. In the opera box, he pressed it one final time, not with a threat, but with a story. He tells it like an old legend about a Sith master who studied life so deeply that he learned how to influence it, even how to keep others from dying. But the story turns at the end. Plagueis passed that knowledge to his apprentice, and that apprentice killed him in his sleep. That is the point Palpatine wants Anakin to hear. Plagueis may have learned how to save others, but he cannot save himself. He never saw his own end coming. Plagueis built a system of complete control. He was destroyed by the one variable his system did not contain. By Palpatine's account at the opera, he studied midichlorians, pressed into the creation of life, and worked to prevent death itself. The project rested on a single assumption, that the Force could be taken apart, studied, and directed by a patient enough hand. Qui-Gon worked from the opposite assumption entirely. He never reached for the Force, he waited for it. And that was the thing no amount of Sith patience could plan against. On a mission about a blockade, on an unplanned stop, he walked into a junk shop and found the Chosen One. The single figure 1,000 years of Sith preparation had been built against. The Chosen One idea is rewritten in front of Anakin's eyes, and no one alive can undo it. The first man to name what Anakin was is 13 years dead. The second is sitting across from him in the opera box. Yoda had earlier admitted to Obi-Wan that the prophecy might have been misread. Padme, dying at the end of the novel, can only say that she believes there is still good in Anakin, a hope, not a frame. No one in the Jedi Order after Naboo is ever able to explain Anakin Skywalker's destiny in a way he can truly accept, and that absence leaves a space in his life that does not stay empty for long, because Palpatine quietly steps in to fill it. When Mace Windu in the final hour tries to call Anakin back by reminding him who he is, the words no longer reach him. By then, Palpatine has already filled that idea with a different meaning inside Anakin's heart, and the earlier claim no longer holds. The Jedi Order falls in a single night, and the Republic falls with it. Obi-Wan Kenobi survives only because his clones are too far away to carry out Order 66 at once, while Yoda survives on Kashyyyk because he feels the betrayal in the Force a moment before the attack begins. In the aftermath, the two of them finally reunite aboard Senator Bail Organa's ship from Alderaan. In the novel, Obi-Wan sits at a small table and trembles. He cannot bear to look at the blank walls because they give his mind too much room to wander. So he fixes his eyes on small things instead. A scab on his knuckle, the grain of the wood, anything that can hold him in place. Around him is the weight of everything he has lost. The Jedi Masters he admired, the friends who were gone, the promise he made to Qui-Gon, and Anakin himself. The promise he made on Naboo to take the boy on and finish what Qui-Gon had begun is the deepest wound of all. Not because he failed Anakin, he taught him for 13 years. Technique, patience, the long fidelity of a master, all of that he gave. His death removed the one teacher who might have met Anakin with open attention instead of institutional caution, and the absence shaped every choice the Order made afterward. The boy from Tatooine needed exactly that kind of first teacher, and he never had one. Obi-Wan, still learning what it meant to be a master himself, could pass on what Qui-Gon had taught him. He could not pass on what Qui-Gon would have been. On Mustafar, the last thread of the promise made over Qui-Gon's pyre breaks in the lava light, and what Obi-Wan carries away from that riverbank is not victory. Then, Padme draws her last breath after giving birth. Her final words, the quiet insistence that there is still good in Anakin, somewhere beyond what he has become. She's the only one left who still says it out loud. Yoda goes into exile, Bail Organa takes the girl, Obi-Wan takes the boy. The galaxy slips into darkness, and the Jedi scatter into silence. And in a quiet moment the films never show, Yoda has one final conversation. The novel places him alone in a small cabin, 900 years old, surrounded by the ruins of the Order and the weight of what has happened. He admits that the failure was his. Then the Force answers him in the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon returns without condemnation. He offers Yoda a path the Sith had been chasing for generations, a way to become one with the Force and still remain conscious. It is the same end Plagueis had tried to reach through control, but Qui-Gon reaches it in a completely different way. He offers it as something the Force gives to those who learn how to receive it. Yoda bows to him, the bow of a student, in the presence of a master. By then, Yoda begins learning from Qui-Gon, but the lesson lasts only a moment. Bail Organa opens the cabin door and tells him that Padme is dying, and Obi-Wan is waiting at the medical bay. Yoda leaves, and the dark times begin. In that moment, the last living link between the Old Order and the path Qui-Gon had opened is reduced to memory, exile, and 2 surviving students. Without councils to consult or archives to reference, what remained was closer to the way Qui-Gon had always worked, passing from one student to the next through scattered lives in silence. First, Yoda, who would carry that knowledge into exile. In the years that followed, at the edge of the Junlin Wastes, an old man watched a boy run across the dunes at dusk and remembered the first time he had heard his own master speak about the will of the Force. Qui-Gon had once taught him that duty was not always the same thing as what was right, and that a Jedi should hold to right action and let duty take care of itself. Out there in the desert, with no order left to guide him, Obi-Wan finally had the space to live inside that lesson. The robes were gone, the rank a hazard to speak out loud, and what remained was a single man holding the watch his master had asked for. That single thread, the man holding the watch his master had asked for, came from a life that ran across decades of training, conflict, loss, and refusal. It started on the day a 12-year-old Padawan was assigned to a master named Dooku.
Qui-Gon Jinn was born on the galactic capital of Coruscant around 80 BBY, and from his earliest days, the Jedi Temple recognized something different about him. In canon, particularly the novel Master and Apprentice, as a young boy, he was taken to the temple for training and assigned to the Heliost clan, where he learned the basics of lightsaber combat from the patient Jedi Master Tera Sanubi. The child who would become one of the Order's most unconventional masters spent his last night in the youngling's quarters laughing with his friends and imagining all the adventures he would have as a Padawan. He practiced with his lightsaber until Master Yaddle ordered him to bed, and at 12 years old, everything changed forever when he was assigned as Padawan to Jedi Master Dooku, one of the most skilled and respected members of the Order. Yet instead of recoiling from Dooku's stern demeanor, the young Padawan impressed his new master with remarkable self-awareness. When Dooku sensed his fear through the Force and pressed him to reveal its source, Qui-Gon confessed that he was not afraid of Dooku himself, but rather afraid of failing, of not becoming a Jedi, and of not being worthy of the path he had chosen. Dooku smiled at his honesty, calling it wiser than most knights ever achieved. This moment of openness marked the beginning of a relationship that would shape both their destinies in ways neither could have predicted. His training under Dooku would forge him into a Jedi unlike any other. But what set Qui-Gon apart from every other Jedi was a philosophy he developed over years of experience, one that the Council would call Maverick, and that history would prove to be the key to immortality itself. This and all following information are drawn from official Star Wars legends and canon sources. We highly recommend exploring these stories. Chapter 1: Love and Restraint. Love found Qui-Gon on the planet Felucia, testing everything he believed about the Jedi Code. As revealed in the novel Master and Apprentice, long before he became a master, the young Jedi went through trials on this Outer Rim world, where he fell in love with someone whose identity canon sources have not revealed. The relationship was romantic and physical, directly challenging the Jedi Code. In the end, Qui-Gon stayed loyal to the Jedi Order, though he kept a Mustafar fire diamond given to him on Felucia as a reminder of what he had lost. Unlike many Jedi who treated love as a path to darkness, Qui-Gon came to believe that attachment, when guided by compassion rather than possession, could coexist with the light side of the Force. Legends material expands this story through the character of Tal, a fellow Jedi Master who was blind but perceived the world through the Force with remarkable clarity. Their relationship was deep and meaningful, developed over years of friendship and shared missions across the galaxy, and her eventual death tested Qui-Gon severely, with his grief nearly leading him toward darkness and the desire for revenge. His restraint proves something important, as choice, not pain, defines a Jedi. He did not let his loss turn him toward vengeance, but instead channeled his understanding of love and attachment into wisdom that would serve him well when he encountered a young slave boy on a desert planet who would one day reshape galactic history. Yet even as he gained this wisdom, the shadow of his former master loomed over everything Qui-Gon had become. Chapter 2: Dooku's Shadow. When Dooku once choked a corrupt senator with the Force, Qui-Gon never forgot it. The relationship between Qui-Gon and Dooku was complicated from the beginning, built on discipline without warmth. According to the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, Qui-Gon survived that demanding training, but he learned its cost over time, and these lessons shaped how he would later train his own apprentice with more patience and understanding than he himself had received from Dooku. During one early mission, the young Padawan and his master were sent to rescue the son of Republic Senator Dagonet, who had been kidnapped by residents of the senator's own homeworld. Their investigation revealed a disturbing truth about how Senator Dagonet was allowing his people to starve for his own personal greed and corruption, and the kidnappers had taken his son to protest these cruel policies rather than for any ransom. When Dagonet arrived with his forces to retrieve his son, a firefight erupted between the senator's guards and the Jedi-backed kidnappers, who had only wanted their suffering to be heard. During a pause in this fighting, Dagonet threatened to burn down the entire village and many others as an example to anyone who might defy him in the future. And an enraged Dooku began force-choking the corrupt senator with clear intent to end his life, showing a side of himself that Qui-Gon had never seen before. But Qui-Gon calmed the situation with a single act that proved his wisdom surpassed his master's. He quickly released Dagonet's son, managing to defuse the entire confrontation without any further violence. In the aftermath, Dooku commended his apprentice's actions and praised him as a wiser man than himself, though the image of his master using the Force to harm rather than protect stayed with Qui-Gon for years afterward. This was not the first time Dooku's methods had troubled him deeply. On an earlier mission, Master and apprentice had joined a strike team to track the notorious feline bounty hunter Shenda Mal across the galaxy. When they eventually found her at her hideout on Numidian Prime, Mal captured Qui-Gon, and before she could harm him, Dooku struck her down with Force Lightning, a dark side technique that saved the young Padawan's life, but caused him considerable concern about his master's true nature. At some point, Dooku and Qui-Gon attended the annual Coruscant Dragonfire Air Rally at the invitation of Council member Jor Aerith, where the young Padawan was shocked to meet Dooku's brother Ramil. When Ramil's airspeeder was sabotaged and crashed during the event, Master and apprentice investigated and discovered that the official investigator was trying to cover up the incident while working for a Genet crime boss named Senevax. Most troubling of all, they learned that Senevax had a spy on the Jedi Council itself, and after escorting Senevax to the Council chamber, they discovered that Jedi Master Braylon was the spy, having been blackmailed because her secret son, Arath Terex, had been selling her influence to criminals for years. Then, Dooku left the Order in 42 BBY, and no one understood why. Despite the troubling incidents with his former master, Qui-Gon had stayed loyal to Dooku and spoke highly of him to others when possible, maintaining contact even after taking on Kenobi as his own Padawan. Then came the shock that rocked the Jedi's world following an incident on Dooku's homeworld of Sereno involving his family and their legacy, leaving Qui-Gon feeling lost and confused as he struggled to understand his former master's unexpected choice. Qui-Gon trusted in the Jedi teachings and himself, which allowed him to recover and replace his shaken feelings with resolve, though the wound of Dooku's departure never fully healed. What he did not know was that Dooku had secretly become an apprentice to the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, and the man who had once praised Qui-Gon's wisdom was walking a path of darkness that would eventually lead to galactic conflict and destruction on a scale not seen in 1,000 years. Years later, after Qui-Gon's death, Dooku would hold Obi-Wan Kenobi prisoner on Geonosis and claim that Qui-Gon would have joined his cause, arguing that Qui-Gon had been dissatisfied with the Council and would have seen the Republic's corruption as Dooku had. Kenobi firmly rejected this idea, declaring that his master would never join him under any circumstances, no matter what flaws he saw in the system. Both men saw flaws in the Jedi system and disagreed with the Council on many matters, but their responses could not have been more different, as Dooku broke away in anger and embraced the dark side, while Qui-Gon stayed and tried to heal the Order from within. With Dooku gone, Qui-Gon channeled everything he had learned into training his own apprentice, determined to pass on a different legacy. Chapter 3: The Living Force. That philosophy would take decades to fully form, built through experiences that tested everything the young Padawan learned from Dooku. While most Jedi focused on the cosmic force and its grand design for the universe, Qui-Gon trusted something different entirely, believing in the living force, the energy that flowed through all life in the present moment. He did not try to command the force or use it as a tool for his own purposes, but instead listened to it carefully and let it guide his actions naturally, trusting that the force would reveal the path when he was ready to see it. This belief shaped everything about him. Where other Jedi trusted rules and prophecy charts, the Maverick Master trusted moments, instincts, and living beings instead. He did not turn toward the light because he expected to win some cosmic game, but simply because it was the light. His philosophy would eventually unlock a secret the Jedi had long forgotten. However, the Jedi Council called him a maverick and watched his defiance with growing concern. They viewed him as someone who would disobey the Jedi Code if he felt it was the right decision. On one occasion, Obi-Wan Kenobi watched in silence as his master told the Council directly that he disagreed with them, standing firm despite their clear disapproval. The older Jedi did not reject the code itself, but rather rejected using it as an excuse to avoid hard choices. Where the Council valued stability and caution, Qui-Gon valued truth and responsibility to the living beings around him. Despite his disagreements with the Council, Qui-Gon remained a respected and powerful Jedi, regarded by his fellows as a great master. He utilized telekinesis and mind tricks on more than one occasion, using them to further his goals during missions. A testament to his power in the Force was when, during a mission on planet WG-4587, he managed to lift an entire CR-70 Corvette through telekinesis, demonstrating abilities far beyond those of most Jedi. His Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi, whom he had taken on in 44 BBY, was an eager apprentice who was more than willing to obey the orders of the Jedi Council than his master often was. Kenobi believed that his teacher could have been a member of the Jedi High Council if he simply followed the rules more closely and showed more respect for tradition. Though what Kenobi knew, as few others did, was that his master had actually been offered a seat on the council and rejected it outright. Instead of lectures, Qui-Gon taught through experience and let the Force be the true teacher. On one occasion, Qui-Gon took Kenobi to a plain and overlooked its native creatures, showing the young Padawan how the Force existed in all life that surrounded them, from the smallest insect to the largest beast. During another training session, the two sparred together, with the older Jedi complimenting Kenobi's growing skill with a lightsaber while also pushing him to improve. Qui-Gon taught his Padawan as best he could, although Kenobi did not always agree with his teaching methods or understand his reasonings, which sometimes led to tension between them. Despite the younger Jedi's clear skill with a lightsaber, his master held him to practicing only basic techniques, which hurt Kenobi's confidence and strained their relationship significantly. What Kenobi did not understand was that Qui-Gon did this purposely, wanting to give his apprentice time to develop his own distinct style out of complete mastery of the fundamentals, rather than rushing ahead before he was ready. At some point, Kenobi came up with an idea for a new weapon consisting of 2 short-bladed sabers attached to a thin chain. And after hearing this idea, his master taught him an important lesson about how lightsabers were about how the Jedi wished to be seen by the galaxy, not displays of power or intimidation, but symbols of peace and justice. Then, Trandoshan hunters attacked the village without warning, seeking Wookiee captives. Around 41 BBY, Qui-Gon had taken Kenobi to Kashyyyk to visit his old friend Brennan, a Wookiee who had saved his life twice during previous adventures during the celebration of Life Day. The lesson about patience was interrupted when the hunters launched nets from the trees to kidnap Wookiees for the slave trade. Master and apprentice fought against the attackers and defeated many of them in fierce combat, though Qui-Gon himself was eventually captured when he demanded the hunters surrender rather than continuing to fight. As he was taken away, the Jedi Master told Kenobi it was up to him to rescue the Wookiees. Kenobi later arrived at the Trandoshan camp, pretending to surrender before freeing his master with the Force, and together with arriving Wookiee reinforcements, they defeated the slavers and freed all the prisoners. But Mandalore became a year-long nightmare that tested both master and apprentice to their limits. Over the span of a year, the civil conflict raged on the planet, pitting martial traditionalists against reformists. The leader of the new Mandalorian movement, Duchess Satine Kryze, became a target for the traditionalists, who hired bounty hunters to end her life and silence her calls for peace and an end to Mandalore's warrior traditions. Qui-Gon and Kenobi were sent on an extended mission to protect her from these threats, spending an entire year on Mandalore, constantly on the run from those who wished her harm and never knowing where they would sleep or when the next attack would come. During this mission, Kenobi developed romantic feelings for the Duchess, and Qui-Gon became aware of the unlikely romance between his apprentice and the noblewoman they were sworn to protect. The Jedi Master did not condemn it or report it to the Council, because his own experiences with love had taught him that attachment was not inherently dangerous, and that fear of loss, not love itself, led to the dark side. Eventually, the conflict ended with the new Mandalorians coming to power and Kryze becoming Mandalore's ruler, bringing peace to the war-torn world at last. Later, another mission would test Qui-Gon's beliefs about violence and peace when he traveled to the planet Bryn. As depicted in the Age of Republic Qui-Gon Jinn comic, Qui-Gon and Kenobi were sent to establish negotiations between the priestess Thayer of Wood and the Metal Clan, who opposed her. While Kenobi stayed in their shuttle, Qui-Gon met with the priestess's rivals, only for the Metal Clan to attempt to kill both him and Thayer as justification for cutting down the world's sacred trees. Deflecting blaster bolts with his lightsaber, he used the Force to leap aboard their shuttle and escape with the priestess. However, Thayer was disgusted by Coruscant when they arrived, viewing it as a city of metal, and she demanded that Qui-Gon return and cut down every member of the Metal Clan. When he explained that violence was not the Jedi way, she called him a coward who did not live up to the legends of the Jedi as great warriors. The accusation disturbed him deeply, though not for the reason she intended. Being called a coward did not bother him, but being called a great warrior did. He returned to the Jedi Temple, troubled, leading Grand Master Yoda to confront him about the internal turmoil he sensed. Their discussion led Qui-Gon to seek answers on a world full of life where he could commune deeply with the Force. The Force guided him to a charted but unnamed world where darkness was spreading across the land. Trusting the Force to show him answers, the Jedi Master found a dark temple and sat upon its throne, entering a terrifying Force vision. In the vision, his skin and robes were covered in dark marks, and he was surrounded by red humanoid beings that grew from shadowy tendrils. When they attacked, he ignited his lightsaber and cut them down, only to watch the red coloring vanish from their bodies. He had slain Jedi, and the same darkness that had marked them began to consume him as well. By choosing violence, the dark side had gained power over him. When he awoke from the vision in horror, light had entered the monument, and he realized the Force had taught him something essential. Balance could be achieved without conflict, because unchecked violence would make the Jedi become what they sought to destroy. Some of the planet's dark corruption had transformed into flowers, existing in harmony with the light. Returning to Coruscant with a new understanding, he found Thayer in one of the city's parks and offered to help her find off-world allies to oppose the Metal Clan. Using his new lessons, he taught her that she would need to find balance with those potential allies rather than seeking their submission. Then, the Council offered Qui-Gon a seat among them, and everyone expected him to accept. During another mission to Pijal, an unexpected invitation came when Master Poli de Patience stepped down from his position on the Jedi Council. Qui-Gon was shocked to be asked, despite his many disagreements with them over the years, and while he was initially pleased by the honor, he thought of his Padawan, knowing that if he accepted, Kenobi would have to be passed to a new master before completing his training. On Pijal, Qui-Gon reunited with his old friend Rael Averross, who now served Crown Princess Fanry as an advisor to the royal court. A performance troupe called the Opposition was supposedly making violent attacks to protest a treaty that would end Pijal's absolute monarchy. But as the Jedi Master investigated the situation more deeply, he discovered that the Opposition was being framed, and their protests had actually been peaceful all along. Qui-Gon received a vision of the treaty signing turning into a bloody battle, and he learned that the treaty would give heavy influence to the Zerka Corporation, a company known for its exploitation of workers across the galaxy. The truth eventually emerged that Princess Fanry herself had been deceiving everyone by secretly building a military force called the Blackguards and framing the opposition for violence she had orchestrated. With Kenobi's help, along with two jewel thieves named Pax Marifer and Rahara Wick, Qui-Gon succeeded in rescuing the slaves aboard Zerka ships from certain death, and after the mission, he made his final choice and declined the offer to join the Jedi Council. Years later, Qui-Gon had joined Jedi Masters Mace Windu, Plo Koon, and Depa Billaba on a mission to the planet Usulon. Sent by Supreme Chancellor Finis Valorum to stop a warlord named Guataco, who was backed by the Hutt clan and had captured children to serve as soldiers. The planet had around 80,000 kilometers worth of tunnels, making it impossible for the Jedi to find the warlord's base through normal means. They devised a plan where Windu would purposely allow himself to be captured, then send a signal through the Force to lead his fellow Jedi to Guataco's location. Although Qui-Gon and his fellow Jedi were unable to reach Windu in time to help him, the Jedi Master had already defeated the army on his own, and Guataco himself was shot by one of the children he had kidnapped. The mission demonstrated the lengths Qui-Gon would go to protect the innocent and showed his willingness to work alongside the Council when the cause was just. Then, a crisis on Naboo would lead Qui-Gon to the discovery that would define his legacy. Chapter 4: Finding the Chosen One. But the Trade Federation tried to kill them within minutes of their arrival on the command ship. As seen in Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace, the blockade of Naboo in 32 BBY was secretly controlled by the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, who was manipulating events from the shadows for his own sinister purposes. Chancellor Finis Valorum dispatched Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan Kenobi to resolve the crisis through diplomacy, hoping they could negotiate a peaceful settlement between the Trade Federation and the people of Naboo. From the moment they arrived on the Trade Federation command ship, Qui-Gon sensed something was wrong, noting an unusual amount of fear for something as trivial as a trade dispute. His instincts proved correct, as the Trade Federation's leaders, influenced by Sidious, flooded the room with poison gas. The two Jedi held their breath long enough for the Federation to open the doors, then fought their way through battle droids to escape. They stowed away aboard separate landing craft heading to the planet's surface and made their way to the capital city of Theed. Along the way, Qui-Gon encountered a Gungan named Jar Jar Binks, who was nearly crushed by a Federation troop carrier while fleeing through the forests, and the Jedi saved him, earning a life debt from the grateful Gungan. After traveling through Naboo's planet core with Binks as their guide, they reached Theed and rescued Queen Padme Amidala from Federation custody. Together with her guards and handmaidens, they escaped the planet on the Queen's starship, but damage from the Federation blockade forced them to land on the Outer Rim desert world of Tatooine to repair their damaged hyperdrive, setting the stage for a fateful meeting. Then, a slave boy changed everything Qui-Gon thought he knew about the Force. The Jedi Master ventured into Mos Espa with Amidala, who was disguised as a handmaiden, and their Gungan companion Jar Jar Binks. They found a junk shop owned by a Toydarian named Watto, who had the parts they needed to repair the hyperdrive. But Watto would not accept Republic credits because they were worthless in the Outer Rim territories, and Jedi mind tricks did not work on his species due to his Toydarian physiology. It was there, in that dusty shop at the edge of nowhere, that Qui-Gon first met Anakin Skywalker, a 9-year-old slave who worked for Watto, repairing broken machines and droids with a skill far beyond his years. The boy followed the Jedi and the others through the streets and warned them about an approaching sandstorm, and when it became clear they could not make it back to their ship in time, Anakin offered them shelter in his home. There, Qui-Gon met the boy's mother, Shmi, who was also one of Watto's slaves, and during dinner, Anakin deduced that the visitor was a Jedi after spotting his lightsaber, speaking excitedly about his dreams of becoming a pilot. Anakin had built a pod racer in secret and wanted to compete in the Boonta Eve Classic, and when Qui-Gon mentioned their need for parts, the boy volunteered to race. In watching Anakin work on his pod, Qui-Gon told Shmi that he could sense a Jedi's potential in her son, and when he asked who Anakin's father was, her answer stunned him. As she explained, there was no father, and she had conceived Anakin without any biological explanation whatsoever. Then, the blood test revealed something impossible that changed everything Qui-Gon believed. Later that night, Qui-Gon tested the boy's blood and sent a sample to Kenobi on the ship for analysis. The results were beyond anything he had expected or could have imagined, as Anakin's midichlorian count was over 20,000, higher than any known Jedi in galactic history, including Grandmaster Yoda himself, who had trained Jedi for 800 years. Through the supposed virgin birth and the incredible midichlorian count, Qui-Gon came to believe that Anakin was the chosen one of Jedi prophecy, the one destined to bring balance to the Force and destroy the Sith forever. The Jedi Master did not see Anakin as a prophecy first because he saw a frightened child shaped by slavery and loss who desperately needed someone to believe in him. Where others might have only seen raw potential or a dangerous weapon, Qui-Gon saw a boy who needed guidance. He approached Watto with a new wager, where if Anakin won the race, Watto would free the boy and his mother from bondage. The Toydarian refused to free both slaves, but agreed to release one, throwing a small colored cube to decide which one would be freed. Using the Force, Qui-Gon ensured it landed on blue, which meant Anakin's freedom was at stake. The race was dangerous and intense, with Anakin facing sabotage and the ruthless tactics of Sebulba, but against all odds, the boy emerged victorious. But Darth Maul attacked from the desert dunes before they could reach the ship. As they headed toward the ship, the Sith assassin who had tracked them across Tatooine finally struck. The two fought across the sand while Anakin rushed to get help, and the ship arrived just in time for Qui-Gon to escape from the Dark Warrior. The brief duel convinced the Jedi Master of something terrible, as the Sith had returned after 1,000 years of silence, and this warrior was clearly trained in the dark side arts. On Coruscant, Qui-Gon brought Anakin before the Jedi High Council and told the Masters about his encounter with Darth Maul, believing the attacker to be a Sith Lord based on his fighting style and the darkness that surrounded him. The Council was doubtful, believing the Jedi had destroyed the Sith a millennium earlier, but they committed themselves to learning the Dark Warrior's identity. The Maverick Jedi also revealed that he believed Anakin to be the chosen one and asked that the boy be trained as a Jedi. The Council tested Anakin and agreed that he was mighty with the Force, but they refused to accept him for training, believing he was too old to begin the rigorous training that shaped Jedi from infancy and that he was dangerously full of fear and anger despite his incredible power. The Council saw risk, where Qui-Gon saw responsibility, and he would not accept their decision, announcing that he would take the boy as his Padawan learner, even if it meant Kenobi had to face his trials early. The Council delayed the discussion, ordering both Jedi to return to Naboo with Queen Amidala to deal with the ongoing crisis and promising to revisit the matter of Anakin's training later. What awaited them there would test everything Qui-Gon believed and decide the fate of the Chosen One forever. Chapter 5: Duel of the Fates. Meanwhile, the Gungans agreed to fight alongside their former enemies against the Federation. Upon arrival on Naboo, the Jedi traveled with Amidala to find them hiding in a sacred area of the forests. There, the two people formed an alliance against the Trade Federation, and the Queen's handmaiden Padme revealed herself to be the true Amidala, having masqueraded as a servant while one of her handmaidens portrayed the Queen as a safety precaution. However, Qui-Gon had not been fooled by her disguise from the moment they met, but he had kept her secret to protect her life throughout their journey. The plan was set, with the Gungan army fighting the Federation forces as a diversion away from the capital city of Theed, while Amidala, her forces, and the Jedi infiltrated the city to capture the Trade Federation's leaders. Qui-Gon made it clear that while he would protect the Queen, he could not fight a conflict for her people, as that was a choice they had to make for themselves. Once inside the palace hangar, they were confronted by Darth Maul, who stood waiting with his double-bladed lightsaber igniting with a crimson glow that cast shadows across the hangar floor. The Sith had been hunting them since Tatooine, and now he would finish what he had started in the desert. This duel was never simply about Qui-Gon versus Maul, as many have observed, but about who would raise Anakin Skywalker and shape the galaxy's future for generations to come, making it one of the most significant confrontations in galactic history. Then, Maul separated Master and Apprentice with a single strike, trapping Kenobi behind energy shields. In the film's climactic sequence, they had fought him together through the hangar and into the palace generator complex in a fierce battle. The Sith dominated the duel with his aggressive form, though both Jedi managed to keep pace as Maul led them through the narrow corridors. Eventually, he knocked Kenobi down several levels, then trapped him behind energy shielding that cycled on and off in regular intervals. The Master and Apprentice were cut off from each other with no way to reunite. While trapped behind the shield, Qui-Gon dropped to one knee and meditated. Even with a Sith Lord pacing before him, the Jedi Master centered himself in the Force. The shields lowered, and Qui-Gon rose and engaged Maul again in a deadly dance of light and shadow. The two combatants were evenly matched as they moved through the narrow corridors of the melting pit until Maul struck with the hilt of his weapon, catching the Jedi Master off balance. In that single moment, the Sith seized his opportunity and drove his blade through Qui-Gon's chest. But Kenobi watched his master fall, and grief became rage in his heart. He waited in horror behind the energy shields, and when they finally lowered, he rushed forward with grief-fueled intensity. The Sith disarmed him and kicked his lightsaber into the deep reactor shaft, then knocked him partly down as well. But Kenobi summoned his master's fallen lightsaber through the Force, leaped from the pit with all his strength, and cut Maul in two with a single devastating strike that ended the duel. The Sith Lord tumbled into the depths below, defeated but not destroyed. It was too late to save Qui-Gon, as no amount of Bacta could heal his mortal wound, and Kenobi ran to his dying master and cradled him in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he held the man who had taught him everything he knew. With his last breath, Qui-Gon made his apprentice promise to train Anakin as a Jedi, insisting that the boy was the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force, and Kenobi swore that he would honor his master's dying wish. Then, Qui-Gon Jinn became one with the Force forever, leaving behind a legacy that would outlast the Order itself. The galaxy lost more than a warrior that day, as it lost its interpreter of the Force and its last advocate for balance through understanding rather than rigid adherence to rules. What followed for Anakin would be rigid training, emotional distance, and fear of attachment, as he would be raised by the Order's rules rather than Qui-Gon's wisdom. Qui-Gon was given a funeral on Naboo, where his body was cremated on a pyre as the flames reached toward the night sky, and many delegates attended the ceremony to honor his sacrifice. But Qui-Gon Jinn's story did not end with his final breath, for he had learned secrets that would allow him to guide the living from beyond the grave. Chapter 6: Beyond Death. However, death could not silence Qui-Gon Jinn, for he had learned a secret the Jedi had forgotten. Before his death, the Maverick Master had begun training with ethereal beings known as the Force Priestesses, who taught him the ancient secret of preserving consciousness after death that had been lost to the Jedi for thousands of years. He traveled to a planet strong with the Force, a world that legend said was the birthplace of life and the origin of midichlorians. He learned that when a living thing died, its life passed through the living Force and into the cosmic Force to become one with the Force. As the living Force and cosmic Force existed in tandem, it became possible for one to retain consciousness and physically manifest themselves after death. He also learned from a shaman of the wills that achieving eternal consciousness required absolute selflessness. His training was incomplete when Maul struck him down, which meant that he could not physically appear as a spirit to the living, but only could speak as a disembodied voice in the Force. The first sign of Qui-Gon's continued existence came approximately 10 years after his death, when Anakin, consumed by grief over his mother's death, struck down a Tusken camp in rage. Through the Force, Qui-Gon called out to him, but Anakin refused to heed the warning, telling himself he was only imagining the voice. Shortly after, Anakin visited Qui-Gon's shrine on Naboo before his secret wedding to Padme Amidala. While at the shrine, Anakin attempted to reach out through the Force to connect with Qui-Gon. The attempt seemingly yielded nothing in his senses, which he interpreted as Qui-Gon's way of telling him that things could always be made right. After feeling a sudden sense of calm despite the brewing Clone Wars, he expressed his thanks, despite not knowing if Qui-Gon was responsible for his personal interpretations. During the Clone Wars, the one who had struck down Qui-Gon returned. Darth Maul had survived being cut in two by Kenobi, replacing his lower body with a cybernetic apparatus. The Sith sought revenge on Kenobi for maiming him, and the two fought on several occasions. During one duel, Maul taunted Kenobi with memories of his master's death, making the Jedi briefly give in to anger to strike against his mentor's slayer. During the Clone Wars, Qui-Gon appeared in a vision to Kenobi, Anakin, and Ahsoka Tano on the mysterious planet Mortis, where the Force was strong enough for him to manifest visually, despite his incomplete training. He warned them that powerful beings on this world sought Anakin for his potential as the Chosen One. It was not until the final days of the Clone Wars that Qui-Gon revealed himself fully to Yoda, knowing that the Grand Master was destined to play a significant role in restoring balance to the Force. As shown in the Clone Wars episodes Voices, Destiny, and Sacrifice, the dead Jedi spoke to Yoda through the Force and announced himself as part of the living Force, stunning the ancient master. He guided Yoda to the swamp planet Dagobah, the first step on a series of trials that would test the Grand Master as he had never been tested before. The living Force guided Yoda in the form of glowing fireflies, leading him through the dark swamps to the Force Priestesses who guarded the secrets of immortality that Qui-Gon had begun to learn before his death on Naboo. Yoda completed the trials and was deemed worthy of learning the secret of eternal consciousness, with the ancient beings instructing that Qui-Gon would guide his training. After the fall of the Jedi Order and the rise of the Empire, Yoda went into exile on Dagobah to await the time when a new hope would emerge from the darkness. Before departing Coruscant for the last time, he told Kenobi that Qui-Gon had returned from the netherworld of the Force and could teach him the secret as well, offering his former apprentice a chance to transcend death itself and continue guiding the galaxy from beyond the grave. For years, Kenobi could only hear Qui-Gon as a voice in his head while living in exile on Tatooine, watching over the young Luke Skywalker from a distance as the boy grew up on his uncle's moisture farm without knowing his true heritage. Qui-Gon's voice provided comfort until the Maverick Master finally completed his own training and learned to appear physically as a spirit, giving Kenobi company at last. When called upon during Kenobi's exile, Qui-Gon did not see his former apprentice only as the old man he had become, but saw every aspect of the man's past and present at once, including the young Padawan who had doubted himself on their earliest missions, the knight who had lost everything on Mustafar, and the hermit who still carried the light despite all he had suffered. He was in awe of Kenobi's steadfast devotion to the light side of the Force, amazed that he had remained a Jedi despite losing everyone he loved to darkness and destruction. Though Qui-Gon blamed himself for placing the burden of training Anakin on Kenobi before he was ready, Kenobi did not share that blame. Anakin fell to the dark side and became Darth Vader. Kenobi argued that Anakin had all the wisdom needed to choose the light and simply chose otherwise of his own free will, refusing to let his master carry guilt for another's choices. Qui-Gon passed his teachings on to both Yoda and Kenobi, and they used what they learned to help guide Luke Skywalker toward his destiny as the galaxy's new hope for redemption. When Luke finally brought Anakin back from darkness in the throne room of the second battle station, the prophecy was fulfilled at last, as balance came to the Force not through domination or destruction, but through understanding, compassion, and the love of a son for his father. Qui-Gon's philosophy survived when the Jedi Order did not, carried forward by those he had touched. The people of Naboo built a shrine to Qui-Gon's memory, honoring him as a hero who had given everything to save them from the Trade Federation's occupation. Though few on the planet had met the Jedi Master personally, everyone knew his name and the sacrifice he made in the Palace Generator Complex fighting the Sith. For years after the invasion, people lit candles during the yearly memorial for all who had given their lives for Naboo. His teachings passed down through generations of Force users, from Qui-Gon Jinn to Obi-Wan, from Obi-Wan to Anakin, from Anakin to Ahsoka Tano, and from Obi-Wan and Yoda to Luke Skywalker. Qui-Gon Jinn's body burned on a funeral pyre on Naboo, but his spirit endured in the Force he had trusted all his life, continuing to guide those who would listen, even after death claimed his physical form forever.
His spirit kept guiding those who would listen, but there was one student he never got to teach in life, the boy from Tatooine. Qui-Gon spent the next 23 years watching that boy become Darth Vader, and he held back the entire time. The reason he waited, and the one moment he finally reached out, is the part of his story almost nobody covers. Qui-Gon was drawn to the Force prophecy in ways that made his fellow Jedi uncomfortable. He treated it as a direction requiring a response. Something was coming. The living Force was moving towards it, and it was his responsibility to be ready. That sense of responsibility brought him to Tatooine. He arrived in 32 BBY on a diplomatic mission. When his ship stopped on a desert planet at the Outer Rim's edge, everything shifted. Inside a repair shop, he met a boy named Anakin Skywalker. The boy's midichlorian count was higher than any number the Order had recorded, higher than Yoda's. Qui-Gon brought the boy before the Council without notice. Too old and full of fear, they said. He pushed back, and the Council held firm. Then came Naboo. Darth Maul struck Qui-Gon down in the Theed Generator Complex. Obi-Wan, trapped behind an energy barrier, could only watch. Qui-Gon delivered two final instructions: train Anakin, and remember the boy was the chosen one. Then he passed. But Qui-Gon did not simply end on that floor. What he had studied for years, ancient Force traditions, connected to the wills, and knowledge about preserving consciousness beyond death was enough. He learned to preserve his consciousness and guided others as a Force ghost who chose to remain connected to the living world. As shown in Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 6, Qui-Gon appeared to Yoda 13 years after Naboo as a disembodied voice. teaching him to preserve consciousness after death. Building on this, the short story Virgins by Tracy Deonn shows the Dagobah cave recording Yoda's arrival with another presence who did not manifest physically, suggesting that even without a body, Qui-Gon continued to shape the spaces he once occupied. In the Disney Plus series Obi-Wan Kenobi, this progression reached its culmination when Qui-Gon appeared in full visible form, telling Obi-Wan he had been present the entire time. The training was complete. Similarly, in Mike Chen's novel Brotherhood, his influence persisted through people he touched. Years after his passing, Anakin used the older man's exact words when encouraging a frightened Force-sensitive girl, absorbing them as naturally as breathing. Taken together, these moments paint a portrait of Qui-Gon not as a figure who faded with death, but as one whose reach only deepened over time. Yet, for all his power as a Force ghost, Qui-Gon did not intervene when Anakin fell to the dark side. When Anakin knelt before Palpatine and became Darth Vader, Qui-Gon was present within the Force. He did not reach out. He held back because the living Force places people at crossroads but does not drag them through. Anakin had chosen wrong. Qui-Gon's appearance would have meant nothing. So he waited. For over 2 decades, he waited, watching as the boy he had freed from slavery become the Empire's most feared enforcer, waiting for the one moment when reaching Vader might actually matter. Chapter 2: Mustafar and the Death of Anakin. When Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, he did more than take a new name. He sealed himself off so completely that no one, not even a Force ghost, could reach him. The transformation happened in stages across a single night. The suit came first, black armor sealing over ruined flesh, a respirator forcing air into damaged lungs, a mask locking over a face that would never be seen again. But the real transformation was psychological and deliberate. This wasn't amnesia, but a deliberate act. In Legends continuity, particularly James Luceno's novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the newly encased Vader spent his first months actively dismantling every connection to his former identity. Memories of Padme were treated as threats to neutralize. Obi-Wan's voice was hunted down and silenced. Even Qui-Gon's hands on his shoulders were identified as interference and shut down. The Legends source makes clear that this was methodical, thorough, and intentional. According to the same Legends novel, the name Anakin became a trigger. Hearing it produced a physical reaction of anger and pain that Vader channeled into the dark side rather than allowing it to destabilize him. He weaponized it. The more he felt it, the more certain he became that Anakin had been weak and deserved what happened. In Canon continuity, the Darth Vader comic series by Charles Soule documents this period differently. Under the Emperor's orders, Vader travels to Mustafar and is told to corrupt his green kyber crystal with his pain and anger to make it bleed. As he does so, he is haunted by visions of Shmi, Padme, and Obi-Wan. That sequence reveals not just how Vader created his weapon, but how he created himself. He did not forget Anakin Skywalker. He broke him. He bled him out the same way he bled that crystal, applying pressure until everything light turned dark. The Jedi teachings, the friendships, the love for Padme, none erased, all locked inside the armor, converted into fuel for the dark side. This is why Qui-Gon cannot reach him. Any attempt to contact Vader during this period would have been treated like every other reminder of Anakin identified as a threat, sealed out, weaponized. There was no opening, no crack in the armor, and no moment of hesitation long enough for anything from outside to penetrate. Yet underneath everything, the armor, the rage, 2 decades of self-destruction, something remained. Not a memory, something smaller. The possibility that Qui-Gon had been right, that the boy on Tatooine had been real, that the prophecy was not mythology, but something the living Force had set in motion. Vader could not kill that possibility. Killing it would require accepting Palpatine was right about everything, so he carried it, locked away, sealed beneath armor and discipline, inaccessible even to himself. The armor sealed shut, but it was not airtight, and 2 decades later, when a crack finally opened, Qui-Gon would be standing on the other side waiting if Vader might actually be capable of hearing him. Chapter 3: 2 Decades of Nothing. For 2 decades, the question wasn't whether Qui-Gon would reach Vader. It was whether Vader would ever become reachable at all. Internally, where a person exists, where decisions are made, Vader has sealed himself off completely. Nothing from outside could penetrate. Qui-Gon, operating as a Force ghost throughout this period, could sense him, but sensing someone and reaching them are not the same thing. For 2 decades, there was no point of entry, no crack and no hesitation, long enough for anything real to break through. In canon sources, the Darth Vader comic series by Charles Soule tracks his earliest actions. His first missions were Jedi hunts. He pursued them with focus beyond duty. Every Jedi he found reinforced what he had decided. The Order had failed. Their teachings were hollow, and leaving them behind was rational. He fought without hesitation, killed without visible emotion. By contrast, in Legends continuity, according to James Luceno's Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the internal process allowing this control was deliberate emotional suppression on a scale that most Sith never achieved. Vader used his emotions, anger, pain, loss, channeled into the dark side, converted to fuel, released through action. Nothing lingered. Every memory was weaponized and discarded. But this was not a natural state. It required constant maintenance. Vader was not passively empty. He was actively suppressing. Every day, every mission, every moment is all part of the same process. He held himself together by holding himself down, leaving no room for anything else to get in. Qui-Gon understood this. Any attempt to contact Vader during this period would have failed. If Qui-Gon had appeared in the first year after Mustafar, or the 5th or 10th, Vader would have treated him like every other reminder of Anakin, identified the presence as a threat, sealed it out, and moved on. No conversation, just rejection, immediate and complete. So Qui-Gon waited because it was the only option. There were no cracks, no internal divisions strong enough to exploit. Vader was a closed system, self-sustaining and self-reinforcing. Then, 2 decades after Order 66, something changed. A young pilot appeared at Yavin. An untrained Force sensitive from a desert planet destroyed the Death Star with 2 proton torpedoes. The pilot's name was Luke Skywalker. The moment Vader learned that name, the armor sealed for 2 decades by will and suppression developed its first real crack. Padme had been pregnant. Vader had been told that she died, the child with her. Now, there was a boy, the right age, with Vader's name, strong in the Force. The crack widened, and for the first time in 2 decades, Vader hesitated. Chapter 4: The First Fracture. 3 years after Yavin, the sealed armor finally cracked wide enough for Qui-Gon to reach through. Vader confronted Luke in a carbon-freezing chamber on Bespin. The duel ended on a gantry above the reactor shaft. Vader made his offer: join him, overthrow the Emperor together, rule side by side. Luke's response was immediate. He would rather die than join Vader. He let go and fell. Vader watched his son choose death over surrender. In that moment, something fractured in ways 2 decades of suppression had never allowed. This was not a strategy. This was a boy who would rather throw himself into a shaft than to stand beside his father. The one who carried Padme's certainty, a refusal to compromise. He who looked at Darth Vader and saw something so unacceptable that death was preferred. In canon sources, the short story Disturbance by Mike Chen, from a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back, shows what happened next from Palpatine's perspective. The Emperor sensed a massive disruption, a surge tied to Vader's internal state. Following its current, Palpatine found Vader dreaming, Luke in the throne room, wielding a red lightsaber. The Emperor defeated, Vader was allowing it. The vision was not a plan. It was a fantasy Vader's conscious mind would have crushed, but it was there, destabilizing the certainty he had built his identity on. For the first time in over 2 decades, Anakin's identity was not being suppressed, it was pushing back. The armor had always been sealed by suppression, discipline, and conversion of pain into power. But now, there was something inside that refused to be converted. That crack, small, barely visible, but structurally significant, was exactly what Qui-Gon had been waiting for. After 2 decades, Darth Vader could finally be reached. Chapter 5: A Voice Through the Crack. The contact Qui-Gon had waited 2 decades to make lasted only moments, but those moments were enough. 2 decades passed between Qui-Gon's death and the moment he finally reached Darth Vader. He came to Vader as a Force presence, not a visible apparition. The encounter took place entirely within the Force, in that space between thought and silence where Vader retreated when alone. Qui-Gon did not argue, he did not accuse, he did not quote the Jedi Code. That approach would have accomplished nothing. Instead, he returned to Tatooine, not physically. In the way a Force presence carries memory and meaning, he went back to the beginning, to a repair shop in Mos Espa, to a 9-year-old boy building droids because he wanted to help his mother, to the moment when the living Force had seen something worth believing in. Qui-Gon reached Vader not to recall a memory, but to affirm what had been real in Anakin Skywalker still existed. The certainty Vader carried that Anakin no longer existed, that he had been weak and deserved what happened, was the one thing Qui-Gon could not leave unchallenged. Because Qui-Gon had been there, he had tested the boy's blood. He had felt the living Force respond in ways it never had before. That response had been real. Qui-Gon's statement was not a promise or an offer. It was narrower, more specific. What was real in Anakin Skywalker was still real, neither redeemable nor salvageable, just present somewhere beneath the armor and suppression, the possibility that the boy had not been completely erased. Qui-Gon did not offer a path forward. That would violate everything he believed. The living Force places people at crossroads. It does not drag them through. Qui-Gon's role was not rescuing Vader from himself, it was restoring the possibility that Vader was still a person capable of making real choices. Possibility alone, not redemption or salvation, just the acknowledgement that the situation was not as final as Vader believed. Then, Qui-Gon withdrew. He did not linger, did not wait for a response, moved back into the Force like water through a crack, present for a moment, then gone. Vader offered no response, gave no acknowledgement. He returned to his duties without visible change. When the time came, he met Luke on Endor. He brought him before the Emperor as ordered. But the seed had been planted, and Qui-Gon never returned. Ghosts appeared, and he was absent. He had done what only he could do, remind Vader that the possibility still existed. Chapter 6: The Precision of Restraint. The reason Qui-Gon never returned to Vader is the same reason the contact worked at all. He understood when to speak and when to trust silence. Force ghosts do not override agency. They exist as presence, not control. The living Force guides people towards crossroads, but does not drag them through. When Qui-Gon reached Vader, he was not mentoring him. He was delivering a single piece of information that only he could deliver, at the only moment when it had any chance of being received. Contact requires openness. For 2 decades, Vader had no such opening. Luke's existence created the crack. Qui-Gon moved into that space, delivered what needed delivering, then withdrew. What happened next is critical. Vader closed again, not completely, but enough. The crack remained, but narrowed. Vader returned to his duties. The fracture was still there. The seed did not disappear. but Vader sealed himself back up around it. And that closure is exactly why Qui-Gon never returned. A second contact would have achieved nothing. Any reappearance would have been met with suppression, rejection, or absorbed as fuel for the dark side. Repeating the contact would not have strengthened the seed, it would have killed it. Vader would have recognized the pattern and identified Qui-Gon as an ongoing threat to be neutralized. The contact was not mentorship, it was a singular, precise, unrepeatable intervention. Once complete, the next crossroads belonged to someone else. Luke would meet his father again on Endor and refuse to fight. When Palpatine attacked him, Vader would be forced into a decision no amount of suppression could avoid. Qui-Gon's contact preserved the possibility that Vader was still capable of making real choices, but it did not make the choice for him. Chapter 7: The Choice. The seed Qui-Gon planted took root in the one place it mattered most, the moment Vader had to choose between his son and his master. Luke Skywalker refused to raise his weapon. Inside the Emperor's throne room on the second Death Star, Palpatine had run out of leverage. Luke would not strike his father down. He stood with open hands and told the most powerful man in the galaxy that he had lost. Palpatine's response was immediate. Force lightning directed at Luke, full power. Vader stood nearby and watched. Then Darth Vader moved, and in doing so, Anakin Skywalker came back. He acted without a strategy, without calculation. He physically lifted the Emperor and carried him to the reactor shaft at the platform's edge. The lightning redirected toward Vader, destroying his life support. By the time the Emperor disappeared, Vader's remaining time was very short. He asked Luke to remove his mask, not for survival, the suit's systems were gone. But Vader wanted to see his son with his own eyes, directly, face to face. Luke did it. For a brief moment, Anakin Skywalker and his son were simply in the same room, looking at each other. No armor between them, just a father and a son, meeting without anything in the way. Then, Anakin passed. In canon sources, particularly Kristen Baver's reference book Star Wars Skywalker, A Family at War, the Chosen One prophecy, long interpreted by the Council as a grand institutional event, turned out to be something far more personal. One man in one room, and a decision to step between his son and the person trying to kill him. The Sith were not defeated by an army or reformed order. They were defeated by a father making a single choice at the last possible moment. But here is what matters most. Qui-Gon did not redeem Vader. He did not save him. Redemption is not something one person gives another. It is a choice, made by the person who needs it, in a moment when that choice is available. What Qui-Gon did was narrower and more essential. He preserved identity. Qui-Gon reminded Vader that what had been real in Anakin was still real. He did not argue, he simply stated it. That single, quiet truth preserved the possibility that a choice could still be made. And then he withdrew, leaving the moment to unfold on its own. The prophecy closed on a burning pyre on Endor. Because Qui-Gon understood what the Jedi Order never fully grasped, the living force does not save people, it places them at a crossroads and trusts them to choose. Qui-Gon trusted the living force more than any Jedi of his generation, but there was one place in the galaxy where the force itself stopped behaving the way the Jedi expected, a planet even Yoda refused to set foot on. Watch the full story of the disturbing planet even Yoda feared to visit next.